I'm Jessica Sharpless, Editor-in-Chief of the Shepherd University Picket, and we are having an open panel discussion today, in part inspired by the fact that we just had National Coming Out Day, National Coming Out Month, looking at freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and discrimination, kind of particularly with dealing with the gay community and some other social issues around that. And I introduced myself, but we're going to go around the panel and just introduce our other speakers today. We're all Shepherd students and faculty, so pretty cool.
Hi, I'm Holtslag. I'm an associate professor of political science.
My name is Rachael Meads, and I am the director of student activities and leadership and fraternity and sorority life on campus.
My name is Mike Barbour. I'm a freelance journalist and senior student in English and history here at Shepherd University.
All right, so just to kind of get the ball rolling, what started this was sort of kind of a hypothetical looking at a situation where we were looking at doing a lot of our media coverage for National Coming Out Day, and we were looking at the situation of what would happen maybe if a journalist decided that it was against their moral imperative to cover some of those things because religiously or morally they disagreed with it. And where does it come down? Is that discrimination, or is that actively using your voice as freedom of speech as that journalist? So what do we have as far as where that line is on opinions, and also even kind of on even an academic opinion?
Well, as a journalist, for me, I don't put my entire conscience, everything that makes up the core of who I am, into every story that I write. So my question would be, if you have just this one issue where it compels you not to do the work that you've signed on to do you put the same conviction of your conscience into everything that you do? So if you write a story on the plight of religious people in another country who are suffering from various forms of oppression, is that a statement coming from and endorsed by your faith, or a religious faith, or any other conviction? And if it is, that's one thing, but if it's not, if you're not coming from that place on an objective story, on what grounds are you drawing in your conscience for a specific story or a specific event? And if it's not true all the time, on what grounds are you making it true in this case?
And also, just in the point you're bringing up, that raises a really interesting issue kind of for journalistic ethics and the perspective, because as a journalist, we really are paid or trying to be non-biased in everything we do. Our idea is to be as neutral and look at both perspectives as possible, you know, even if you don't agree with them normally. So,
Oh, I've been there.
Yeah, so that's a bigger journalistic ethics issue even as opposed to just a general ethics issue. So, Rachel, from your perspective, kind of within the Shepherd community, you know, if we're looking at it just as even among students, where do you think, like, is there a line kind of among students as far as how this maybe could be approached maybe in a best or a neutral light?
Well, it depends on how you're looking at it. If you're looking at what's the climate on campus, I think the climate that we try to create is a place where students, faculty, staff all feel comfortable coming into a space to have an exchange of ideas and to really try to learn, because that's what education is supposed to be about. It's about drawing out ideas from people, not just indoctrinating or pouring things in, but really getting them to engage and think critically. I think we have students that are at all levels of the spectrum. You know, when they come through the door, you get one type of an experience, and maybe the only experience that a student has had walking through the door is from their small hometown or their own community or their family of origin. So we know that people come in with certain sets of beliefs, values, ideas that are sort of ingrained from when they first come to us. Those change dramatically. I watch the evolution of students all the time, and I'm sure, you know, Art can attest to this too. The person that you see when they come in at first is not the same person who's graduating and walking out the door. And that's one of the joys of being part of this process and being part of this environment. That sometimes people come in with a particular set of beliefs and they kind of are challenged to think again and to learn and reframe the way that they see the world. And that's not about trying to break down like the inner core of who a person is or saying all of that stuff is bunk, because your core values and identity are pretty solid most of your life. That's generally kind of how things go. But you learn to think of things more critically and think of them in a different way. And I think that's part of what makes Shepherd a special place. I think that we're a pretty inclusive campus. We have a really diverse range of student organizations, ideologies, perspectives, and generally they all engage and kind of communicate pretty well with one another. When I go to other schools and say, well, what's going on in your campus, some of the things that are hot issues for us may not have parallels there. That we have a lot of freedom here, I feel like. We have a lot of intellectual freedom to talk about ideas, to talk about different platforms, politics, without a lot of like repercussion or backlash on us. And I think that's a great privilege that we're in a space that can do that. And I don't know if that gets at the heart of what you're talking about, because I feel like I can't generalize and say, well, all students are like this, because they're not. There are 500 different varieties of those students and their experiences, and they evolve, they change, over time.
Yeah, generalizations are both bad and also hard.
Yeah, they're hard.
They're just that, because it is where we can't really say, all students are like this, or even all people are like this. But I guess the real question, kind of just at the heart of it, is how do we keep that as an open discussion for everybody, as a safe space for everybody?
Okay, that's something I can't address, because in student affairs we do a lot of this work, and maybe some people feel like maybe we're too much engaged in these conversations about things like, well, how do people's values develop? What is it that you do? I really don't believe that there is such a thing as value neutral education. I don't think you can have conversations without talking about integrity and beliefs and core held ideas. I think we bring things to the conversation that have to be acknowledged. I feel like there's a lot that happens on campus in terms of training, opportunities for students to really engage with bigger ideas, with global perspectives, and particularly when it comes to LGBTQ issues, I think we have a lot of support systems that are kind of built into place. I have had experiences where it doesn't mean that every student in the world is comfortable saying, I live in an inclusive society. There are people that are still very uncomfortable with difference. Difference is tough. I mean, it's one of the things that I think we as a nation struggle with, and I think the planet is in a struggle with this idea of just because you are different from me doesn't mean that you're wrong, or that we cannot have a conversation and we can't engage. And I think that's one of the beauties of our student organizations and opportunities, is that it gives students real life experiences to be able to engage with some of those ideas in a safe place where you can test and you can challenge and you can be challenged, and then grow from those because someone has a conversation with you.
Well, Christopher Hitchens said, the essence of a free mind is not in what it thinks, but in how it thinks. Mm-hmm. But taking that to what it's meant to be, it's not about what you think of a group of people, what you think about a certain topic, but how you're thinking about it, how you engage it. Are you engaging on grounds that you feel threatened? Are you engaging on grounds where you're trying to gain knowledge? Right. And as long as the environment continues to be in gaining knowledge, mm-hmm. and that certainty continues to guide us forward, I think we'll be fine. Mm-hmm. But I think as a society, mm-hmm. we have drawn a clear line in the sand on this discrimination issue.
Yeah.
I don't think we struggle with it. I think some people are struggling with it, but they're resisting against it. They insist upon their right to discriminate. And I'm sorry, the freedom of religion is also the freedom from it.
Well, it's pretty clear, I think, that the Supreme Court and federal courts have ruled on several occasions, and this goes back to the civil rights era, that discrimination is unacceptable, and that freedom of speech does not overrule the right to discriminate. And then, of course, to use religion as a form of discrimination would be a problematic issue.
Yes.
However, if you then look at the brief of the DOJ, the Department of Justice, in the master cake shop case, which is about the gay couple which orders a cake for their wedding,
The wedding cake.
and then is not helped by the shop owner, who claims freedom of speech and association. And the DOJ steps into that case, basically denying everything that happened before on the issue of discrimination. And if we follow the brief of the Department of Justice, then discrimination against LGBTQ people would be allowed. Now, likely the Supreme Court, it hangs, of course, again around Judge Kennedy, but likely the court will rule according to the Colorado courts, meaning against the cake shop owner, and so in favor of anti-discrimination. But you see that there is a change in attitude towards these issues.
Yes.
And so there is well, the question is if that is dangerous or if that is a social discussion that needs to take place. And I think that's a social discussion that is much broader than just the LGBTQ issue. It also goes to the issue of protest on campus,
Yes.
to the issue of protest against statues, where, you know, these are all free speech issues and issues of feeling discriminated. Now, a feeling of discriminated is different from being discriminated.
Yes.
And so we have to be careful that we do not equate the two.